Welcome to Short Stories by Hawk. Here you'll find quick, enjoyable tales crafted to intrigue, amuse, or simply make you pause for a moment. Each story is short enough to fit into your day, but memorable enough to stick with you. So sit back, take a breath, and let me tell you a story. It's that simple. Let's begin. Okay, today's story takes place in an alternative universe, and it takes place in the Kingdom of Canada, current day. The bells above the cafe door jingled softly as Margaret stepped into Maplehurst Coffee House. It was her favorite spot in the town of Kingston, cozy, wood-paneled, and always smelling of freshly brewed coffee and maple syrup. Today, the late November chill clung to her coat as she unwrapped her scarf, shaking off the remnants of the snow flurries outside. The cafe buzzed with the familiar hum of conversations, the whirring of an espresso machine, and the occasional clink of ceramic mugs. Margaret glanced at the counter and felt her heart do a little leap, as it had every day for the past 3 weeks. Behind the counter stood Ezra, the new barista, who had arrived in Kingston just about a month ago. Tall and wiry, with soft brown eyes and a southern accent that hinted at lands far from the northern kingdom of Canada, Ezra had quickly become a topic of whispered conversations among the regulars. He was quiet, polite, and carried an air of mystery that Margaret couldn't quite resist. Today, she decided, was the day she would finally muster the courage to strike up a proper conversation. Margaret joined the queue, watching Ezra work. He moved with fluid precision, pouring steaming milk into a cup while chatting with the customers in front of her. His voice was warm but carried a hint of something deeper, maybe sadness, maybe resolve. When it was her turn, he looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Margaret," he said, his voice tinged with that southern drawl. She blinked, surprised he knew her name. "Well, good morning, Ezra. How are you today?" "Not bad," he replied, wiping his hands on a towel. "The snow's picking up out there, isn't it?" "It is," she said, fumbling to keep the conversation going. "But nothing a good cup of coffee can't fix." His smile widened. "That's what I like to hear. What it'll be today?" "Just the usual," she said, trying not to sound too eager. Ezra nodded and turned to the espresso machine. As he worked, Margaret decided to dive in. "So, Ezra, I've been meaning to ask, where are you from? Your accent's not exactly local." He paused, the milk frother in his hand letting out a low hiss. For a moment, she worried she'd overstepped. Then he looked at her, his eyes softer than before. "I'm from the Confederate States," he said quietly. Margaret blinked. Though Kingston was a melting pot of people from across the world, the Confederate States of America were a topic most avoided. The CSA, born out of the secession wars of the mid-19th century, had become a fractured authoritarian regime in the modern era. Stories of its strict social hierarchies and harsh laws often made the news in the Kingdom of Canada, but it was rare to meet someone who had fled from there. "Oh, I hope I didn't pry," she said quickly. Ezra shook his head. "It's all right. I don't mind talking about it with the right people." He slid her coffee across the counter and leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping. "I came here to be free. The Kingdom of Canada. It's a place where people can breathe, you know? Back home, everything felt tight, like there wasn't enough air to go around." Margaret nodded, unsure of what to say. She could sense the weight of his words, the experiences he wasn't sharing. "Well, I'm glad you made it here," she said. His smile returned, smaller but sincere. "Me too." A pause hung between them, and Margaret felt her courage bubbling up again. "So, Ezra, do you have any days off?" He raised an eyebrow, a spark of curiosity in his eyes. "Well, I do. Wednesdays and Fridays, usually." Well, she said, wrapping her fingers around her coffee cup, if you're free this Friday, maybe we could grab a coffee somewhere you don't have to make it yourself. Ezra chuckled softly. Are you asking me out, Margaret? Her cheeks flushed. Well, I might be. He leaned on the counter, his gaze meeting hers. I'd like that. Margaret felt her heart skip a beat as she smiled back. Great, it's a date. The bells jingled again as another customer walked in, breaking the moment. Ezra straightened, returning to his work, but not before giving her one last smile. As Margaret stepped back out into the snowy street, she felt lighter, as if the weight of the gray skies had lifted. She sipped her coffee and grinned to herself. It wasn't just a date, it was a new beginning for both of them. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little short story that takes place in an alternative universe. Just be aware, I am working on an episode podcast regarding this time period, this alternative time period. I'll be posting it shortly under my Descent into the Rabbit Hole podcast videos. With that, have a great day.